Welcome everyone to the final day of IDMWORKS. What I want to talk today about is modernizing your consumer IAM capabilities. I don't want to focus on just the idea of consumer, customer, the traditional sense, but basically external people, utilizing services you're providing. This could be possibly B2B, B2B2C, B2, insert letter here, right? My name is Nick Hunt. I'm the Director of Delivery for IDMWORKS. I've been doing security for 23, 24 years now. And I actually have the opportunity to talk to a lot of customers that are going through these type of engagements, projects, programs, everything else. And what I want to talk about today isn't so much the tech side of modernizing your CIM program, but changing the narrative around what it really means to modernize your program. Because I think a lot of times, myself included, is, let's buy a tool, right? And what I've really found a lot of success with and what we found at IDMWORKS is it's about changing how you present CIM to your business, right? It's not about the tool, as we'll talk about in here. It's about changing the narrative of how that tool is used and how it enables your business, right? So we'll have a little bit of fun here. If you have questions, definitely ask them. It's Thursday afternoon. Sorry, I'm forgetting my days. You have a question. Let's keep this fun today, right? So, brief agenda. What does modernizing really mean? Some keys to success and basically where to start, right? There's some simple things you can do right up front before you even start looking at tech. What are those key things that you can start researching now, engage with your business, your partners, whatever it may be, to help you set the stage for building out this modern platform. So, setting the stage a little bit, how many of us are evaluating digital transformation projects? Just quick show of hands. Most of us, right? IT modernization, cloud migration, pretty much everyone in the room, right? How many of you have talked to your digital marketing and lines of business about their key initiatives? Actually, more. Usually a lot of conversations I have is you're the consumer, like they're doing it and they've already picked a vendor. So if you're talking, you're ahead of the game a little bit here. But what does modernizing really mean? I don't know. I've heard a lot of different definitions for it. So key drivers and initiatives, though, to break it down a little bit, what modernizing really means. It's digital transformation, IT modernization, cloud migrations. Those are all kind of some of the key initiatives, at least key terms I hear when I'm talking to people. But breaking it down a little bit, it's adoption of digital technology, with the goal of implementing to increase value through innovation, invention, customer experience, right? And I'm highlighting keywords here that I think really set the stage in terms of shifting that narrative, the original kind of intent of my conversation here today. That if you focus on these things, you can kind of talk more at the business, in terms of what their key initiatives, what their driver is, what are they trying to modernize. I still talk to a lot of customers today that either have paper-based forms, especially in healthcare, financial services, different stuff like that. They're trying to digitize, but where are they storing it? How are they integrating that with the overall customer experience, right? How are you increasing value? How are you focusing on the customer experience, right? These are key things that you can think about as you're looking at the definition as we're talking today, and building out that program. IT modernization, big things here, moving away from old solutions or legacy systems. I still come across a lot of, database, LDAP, I've even seen some kind of other weirder things in recent history, right? And a lot of times you've got multiple of them. So the business is saying, hey, we want to modernize, but you're trying to basically incorporate or move away from these legacy systems, right? So breaking it down a little bit more, what's the focus? Digital technology, we are in IT, security, obviously digital. Increased business value. This is a hard one. I talk a lot about increasing business value with customers, like how are you enabling the business? And it really manifests itself in a couple of different ways, right? How are you providing actionable data to the business? How are you scaling, growing, allowing them to move at the speed of their business, right? A lot of times I talk to people and like, hey, we want to do this new website, we want to launch this new brand, we want to launch this new market, whatever it may be. The business is ready to go, but IT is, IAM ourselves are sitting there saying, well, we're not ready yet. We need to build the infrastructure, everything else, right? The big thing here is provide the service, let them move at their speed, right? And we'll talk a little bit about it. Improve customer experience. I'm very guilty of this. If I go to a website and it looks old or it fails, I move on. If it's collecting a ton of data, usually the good example I find here from a customer experience is I go to a website and it says, oh, sign up here to get our newsletter. Well, honestly, if I'm getting a newsletter, you need my email address. But why are you asking for my first name, last name, state, zip code, all this type of stuff just to subscribe to something, right? How are you making this easier to capture that data, when needed and at the right time and appropriately? And then, like I said, time to market and speed. The more you can get out of the way, and let the business operate at their speed and just provide services, your life's going to be a lot easier and you can release features a lot faster. And how do you do this? Through innovation. Rethink how you're providing, your consumer external user capabilities to the business, right? A lot of times I hear, well, we're going to buy this vendor and we're going to stand up these gateways and, we're going to do all this integration work. Take a step back for a second and say, well, what's the easiest way for them to do something? Give them a portal to register and let them do it itself. These types of things. Modern solutions and standards, integrations are key. I said self-service, let them integrate. Automated, and then speed and agility. And the big one here is resilience. The business value isn't so much about letting them operate, but how are you scaling with them? I've been on a number of different projects where during busy times, things speed down, you lose customers, all that type of stuff. It fails regularly, different stuff like that. How are you building this program, this platform to be resilient? And then ensuring trust. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a security guy, right? That was kind of my background. Providing this infrastructure is about ensuring trust through a number of different ways. The newsletter is a good example. If I see they're collecting a bunch of info just so I can subscribe to something, what are they using it for? Instantly, that starts ticking things off. If it looks old, or a number of different factors, immediately I start kind of tuning out and say, this doesn't look right, right? Consumers are starting to recognize this stuff a lot more, and they'll move on to the next guy or person, sorry. So what are some keys to success? From an IDMWORKS perspective, we look at CIM solutions in a number of different ways. Number one, business value. You'll hear me say it, but that means different things to a lot of people. Everyone in this room has a different definition for business value, whether it's driving customer intake, making it easy, improving end users. It could be your employees, everything else, right? That business value is going to mean a lot of different things based on different businesses. The challenge is to figure that out. User experience, always number one for me. I talked to a number of people, and they're like, well, we're going to do CIM, we're building out this program, we're modernizing, whatever it may be. The number one question I ask is, what do you want this to look like? I don't care about the tech a lot of the time. Hey, Mr. Marketing person, Mr. Line of Business, whatever it may be, what's your pie in the sky idea? What's your vision of what you want this to look like, right? Start there. What's bad about the experience today? Those good seeding questions to start asking people. Integrations. We talked about modernization, cloud migration. What we're finding is the bigger applications of the old days, right? You've got a web server and it's got 50 features in it, right? That's much easier to handle from a security and just general passing things around than I've got an AWS app, I'm integrating, whatever service platform, fulfillment platform. I mean, everything is all over the place. So if you're building things and it's very kind of single tier, single use, and you're not thinking about the integrations, you're going to start running into some of those experience issues. Trust is always the forefront for me. People are demanding this. How are you making it easy, to show trust, but at the same time, not making it look like a security tool. I had a conversation with someone last night that the easiest way to sell this to the business is not make it look like a security tool. If it's got extremely long passwords, you're constantly getting MFA prompts, it's hard to register, all these different things that people are aware of now, it's going to look like a security tool at the end of the day. And, your experience is going to go down and the business isn't going to want to use it, right? Then operational resilience. The big thing here for me is build it to grow with the business, not build it to account for essentially 1 month a year, 2 months a year if you're in like retail and stuff like that. The days of having to, build something for that, those edge cases, and essentially once you hit that edge case and exceed it, have to rebuild it. There are ways of building out, modern platforms that essentially grow and are cost effective with the business. How are you handling different regions? How are you testing these things? A lot of different things you can think about from a resilience perspective. So, saying all that, I know it's a kind of a lot of different things. I'll play devil's advocate here in terms of like what I hear and how to change that narrative. The traditional, what I hear is like, well, we need a user login to basically secure an application. Well, yes, the intent is a user login, but there's a lot more you can do with modern platforms. You can provide personalization. You can provide a digital experience, whether that's passwordless, risk-based authentication, step-up authentication. You can make it very simple rather than just saying, well, I need a login form on a page, right? Go back to the business and say, we can store this, we can handle your consent, we can handle all these other things and provide it as a service so you don't need to think about it. Registering users, this is a big one for me. If you're just registering users, that's kind of a very kind of small view of what you can do here, right? Going back to my original example of the subscribing for a newsletter, you could just capture the initial email address, the initial contact information, call that level 0. That's the start of the journey or your customer's journey with your website. That can feed into the business and say, hey, we're getting all this type of stuff. We're starting to profile these users, and as they interact with your portal, whatever external website you're working with, progressively get more and more info that you can start, interacting with them. Build an LDAP, or a database to collect and validate usernames. I'll say I came from Oracle, so before I joined IDMWORKS, so definitely think about this type of stuff a lot, but there are services out there that make this a ton easier, right? What you need to do are provide services to authenticate the users appropriately based on how you want to do it, right? But also authenticate the applications across the digital experience, right? It's not just an app anymore. It's a set of services that you need to pass these credentials around and think about. And then build an environment to support a specific benchmark. Really what you need to think about here is build scalable, cost-appropriate things. I do a lot of cloud development lately, and we always start at a very minimal level, enough to keep the lights on. As things happen or as you know what's happening within your business. Usually a good example is Black Friday, end of the year, retail and stuff like that. Heading into that, start scaling up and essentially benchmark and build it to run at that scale at that time and scale back down when you're done. There's plenty of examples out there on how to do this, and there's a lot of development going around this type of stuff. You save a ton of money over the year, and you can focus that money on other resources of actually building more functionality into this. I see this a lot, impersonating or hard coding credentials across services. The big thing here, from a modern view of it, is to delegate and pass digital tokens. Provide that digital experience across those services. One, for security reasons, but two, from analytics, business enablement, everything. As people are moving through that journey with your public presence, right, you want to be able to know what they're doing. If you're hard coding, impersonating, it's easy to spoof this stuff or grab those credentials and start doing other nefarious things, right? The technology, the standards, everything is there to be able to do this. It's just a matter of kind of building out that integration. Multi-factor prompt for authentication. I see a big push, and I've seen a lot of success in looking at more from a risk base. If someone's just logging in or bringing their own identity and they're viewing their personal info, right? They're not changing anything, they're not buying anything, they're just browsing around your website. You know who they are, right? You don't need to authenticate them again. But as soon as they start doing something different, they want to change their info, they want to make a purchase, maybe it's at a certain level of a purchase, they're doing something. At that point, start stepping up just to validate who they are. There's a lot of articles out there. There's probably a lot of talks this week about MFA fatigue, authentication fatigue, insert fatigue here, right? That people are very aware of, and they're kind of getting fed up with it. Look at all the password breaches over the last year type thing, right? The big providers. Not to say that's a bad thing, they're targets, but at the same time, having all these passwords all over the place it's a challenge. I still see a lot of this, but batch processing, like we're getting users, we're registering users, every night you're running a process to essentially push them around, right? Most providers I work with anymore provide real-time interfaces to do this. So on capture, on enablement, on change, take care of it right there, right? If they want to do something, they shouldn't have to wait a day to do it, right? Or wait till that next batch runs. The services, integrations, everything are there to be able to do this. If they have to wait, they're going to go to the next guy or next company. From a marketing, I talk to different digital groups. They get plenty of analytics out of websites, who clicked, where they're coming from, possibly who they are, different stuff like that. But the big selling point for me is, hey, I can actually provide who the person is, a profile of them, their previous usage analytics, all based on that initial experience and how you register them and how you're passing their data across your site. Take that to your business, and they can see, cart abandonment, what they're viewing. They can provide previous search history, all the fun stuff that they can now start building campaigns and everything around. They're going to be your best friend. So we'll provide password self-service and recovery. I see this a lot. Definitely a good thing and always a good backstop, but why even provide it if you don't need a password, right? If you can enable them to use something else in a secure means and just revalidate them through other means, right? The more you can get out of the password business, the less you have to worry about it and support it, right? And at the end of the day, the less you have to worry about from a risk perspective. So, where to start? The big thing is, obviously changing the narrative conversation, but from there, the number one thing is talk to your business, right? What are their main challenges? What do they want to do? What can't they do today is usually a very good starting point for me. What do you want to do that you can't do today that we can essentially help you with? Talk to support. These guys are always forgotten. Talk to your help desk. What are common challenges? I just talked to someone a few weeks ago that's still getting, 3,500, 5,000 just general password self-service and account registration calls a week. If that's significant and you're spending a lot of money doing that, what's a way you can figure out to essentially fix that, right? That's less staff, they can focus on other bigger issues. Talk to security and compliance. What's your current program platform not provide from a regulatory standards, whatever it may be. The big one I see here is consents, and looking at the international, the state regulations, what it be, CCPA, what's the New York one? I always forget the name of it. What's it? Well, GDPR would be the Europe, but the New York one, I always forget the acronym for it. But anyways, talk to them. What are they having challenges with? Likewise, how can you provide an interface to automate their compliance, right? They have to go through compliance audits, attestations, whatever it may be. There's a big push out there with GRC platforms and everything else. If you can provide API endpoints, automated reports, stuff that they can pull this real time, that they don't need to come to you, makes their life a lot easier and less time you need to spend with auditors, right? Once you get all that, inventory the issues and develop a plan. Don't forget this, but what's your current platform doing right? Obviously you got stuff out there, you're capturing data, you're selling stuff. What are you doing right today? Where can improvements be made? There's always newer, better, kind of cool ways to do things right. Do you need to go buy a platform, or can you work with what you have? I think the motion, I'm a vendor at the end of the day. I can definitely sell you stuff, but I walk into a lot of people, and what you have today will serve everything you need to do. I think the motion always is, well, if we're having challenges, say, let's go look, right? You might be able to do it with what you have today, save some money, right? Don't forget about what you already have. Develop a plan. Focus on building the platform, not fixing issues. I bring up password self-service. That's usually an easy picking target, right? We all have password issues. But if you just focus on fixing the password, you're going to forget about fixing password self-service issues. You're going to forget about a lot of other things in between that you could possibly leverage. So once you build that plan, build to that plan, not to just fix issues, right? And once you get that platform going, I talked about the speed of the business, providing services, everything else. Once you enable them to essentially be more self-sufficient, they can integrate, they can do what they want to do, you can focus more on feature enhancement, releases, affecting change, incremental improvements, everything else, rather than chasing kind of supporting the business, right? I think that's the biggest challenge, and I've had it for years, is what's that next integration we need to do? What's that next, request that's coming in? What's our backlog look like, from a business perspective? If you can get out of that and focus on, well, we're going to release this feature, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, different stuff like that, makes your life easier, and people are going to want to use the platform. I actually flew through that, so let's have some fun and talk. What questions do you guys have? I saw some nodding. What challenges do you guys have? No one? Come on. There are a lot. That's something I probably didn't talk about, but there are a ton of challenges. This isn't easy by any means, right? I've got a ton of projects I'm working on right now, and they're long, multi-year programs, right? But you got to start at some point, right? And I think, myself included, we kind of get stuck in the analysis of, here's all the challenges. Where do we start? The big thing is just start. Get it going. Sell it to the business, right? Set that plan. Let them know what you're doing and why you're doing it. I talked to someone last night. I use the analogy, build it and they will come. Someone called it the field of dreams approach, right? In a lot of cases I'm finding you build the right program, you give them the capability, the tools to define their own destiny, they come very fast. The problem you run into, though, is they come very fast, right? Like, oh, we want this. I want it today. Well, it's going to take me a little while to do this, right? You need to set those expectations up front, which can basically bring up its own challenges. Yeah.
Can you talk more about, you said one of your last bullets, build a platform, not focus on individual challenges. Can you say more about what you mean about that?
Yeah, so what I see a lot of people doing is, I'm going to use passwords because it's an easy target, right? But the example I had of the 3,500, 5,000 password tickets a month or whatever it is, right? If you focus just on addressing password issues, you're going to look at it from a password problem, right? Well, let's, do KBA, let's do SMS rather than, other things, right? If you take a step back and say, well, from a platform perspective, passwords aren't necessarily needed, right? We could do bring your own identity with public providers. We could move away from passwords completely and do more of a step up or risk-based authentication, right? If you look at the password issue, you're going to think about it from a password problem rather than looking at it from a rethinking the whole authentication exchange. Another good one is cloud migrations. This is when I don't want to say I come across it a lot, but it's definitely come up a few times. But we're doing a cloud migration, right? Okay. Well, the normal motion is we'll lift and shift what we have today into the cloud, right? Well, if you look at it more from a platform approach, you can say, well, if we're doing this on-prem today in a traditional model, right? What are cloud native services or serverless type of deployments we can do from a cloud perspective, right? Look at your goal, where you want to go, the platform, and basically move to that, right?
You talked about modernizing, but you didn't really touch on maintaining the legacy as you modernize.
It depends on what you mean by maintaining the legacy. If it's...
If you have a homegrown solution and you're buying a sign-up platform, everything in the business runs off that legacy system until you're ready, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a cut switch of one day, right? You want to transition different features at different times, so what is your recommendation of what you've seen around that?
Easy approach is to get off the legacy, right? Easy button, turn it off. No, I'm just kidding. Basically build that into your migration plan. I'd say 3-4 years ago, legacy platforms were a big inhibitor, right? Because you've got, what's a good example? Web access management, more header-based or agent-based authentications, right? With some platforms. Well, the inhibitor was, well, we can't redevelop the app to support, SAML, OIDC, some kind of modern flow, whatever you want to call it, right? So we need to stick with this. Well, the vendor space is catching up through a number of different ways, right? You could look at the orchestration vendors downstairs. They're introducing ways to essentially integrate some of these legacy apps, right? Even some of the major cloud players, I shouldn't say some, most are developing legacy support to support that so you can move to a modern platform and essentially bridging that divide for you, right? That part of the plan, talking to the business, that type of stuff is going to have to account. And that's going to go into your vendor selection and or kind of rebuild of your platform. Like, you need to do this for 2 years, right? Maybe that's part of the overall modernization. You're going to be off in 2 years. Pick a vendor that can support it rather than wait till it's modernized and then kind of move with them. So you can start enacting some of the stuff to get the features in there while still supporting the old. Or you could go an approach like I'm doing with another customer right now. We essentially bolted on some modern features to the legacy authentication scheme and integrated that with the modern, right? So as you're migrating things up, everything's operating natively on the cloud platform, right? But we've got an integration behind the scenes to the legacy platform. We just kind of bolted on some features and said, you know what, we're not going to carry any of this because it's going to be too challenging. We just build a minor integration between the two. And we didn't have to buy the kind of legacy support or legacy supportable features, let's put it that way. Anyone else? You guys said you're going to beat me up. Sorry, my coworkers. They said they were going to. Yeah.
So, most of us have dealt with the workforce side of identity, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you almost always end up working with your business organization or marketing, etc. But as the team talks to the business, what are some of the business values that they should be focusing on so that they can get that discussion?
It's a great question. The question was, what is some of the business value you can basically use as, communicating out to the business, talking to groups you don't traditionally talk to, right? The number one thing that I always go to is usage analytics, right? That digital experience, tracking people through the journey, not only in your website, but also partner websites. Identity is a fun thing that I'm a person, right? And I'm a person on that site and I've got an experience. A lot of digital groups I talk to, they've got tons of analytics, right? You can go look at a ton of websites and see all the analytics, links and frames and everything behind the scenes, right? What they can't do is they can't say, Nick hit the site here and clicked here and then went over here to this other site, right? It's just a general profile possibly about me. And or if there are multiple sites and services involved, you could get disparate data. I was talking to someone recently that they had multiple profiles about a single person based on how they hit a site. It could be an email profile, it could be a family profile, it could be a phone profile. And they were trying to do campaigns across all these and they couldn't identify the person. If you can roll all that into, a single profile and present that to the business, now they can actually start enacting change based on that experience. Hey, I saw Nick hit this website, he put this in his cart but abandoned it, and then went over here and started looking at these things. Next time you want to do an email campaign, hey, I saw you're doing this. Is there a reason why you didn't buy it? Or next time I hit the site, maybe you show an advertisement or a sale for that, right? These are marketing things you can start presenting, and start profiling the users. Hey, I see a lot of people do this, or people from this region are looking at this part of the site. Providing that actionable data to them, they're usually your best friend at that point. Like, how fast can we get this, right? That's a big one. To other non-line of business, to CIOs, everything else, cost. That's usually a big one. So we know, end of year retail, right, or certain points of the month, year, we've got to build to this infrastructure. The rest of the year, it's running at 5% utilization, right? You're paying for that entire year of that maybe 1 month, 2 weeks, right? If you can scale down that infrastructure and just scale up when needed, the cost savings could be huge, right? Now, a lot of leaders are going to say, hey, we've got money we can spend elsewhere to basically add more to the modernization project, right? That's usually a big one. Cost, money, everything else. Not having to maintain infrastructure. These are all big things that you can start really realizing quickly. Not having to pay licenses. That's another big one. Move outside the infrastructure. You have an active user model, right? Your users only use it a couple times a year, but you're paying for the license for an entire year. That's a big savings right there. Anyone else? Yay, nay? Everyone's ready for the party tonight? Well, if you do want to stick around and talk, I'm going to be here for a little while. So, do appreciate you guys coming today.